Once the richest country in Latin America, Venezuela is now in the grips of a devastating economic crisis. Hyperinflation has made the currency worthless, food and medicine are scarce, and millions of people have fled the country. What started the downfall of Venezuela's economy? What does the future hold for the people of Venezuela? Join us as we get to the bottom of Venezuela's terrible economy. Oil-rich Venezuela has been on a roller coaster ride, riding high on economic booms but plunging into political ruin. The country, known for having the world's largest oil reserves, serves as a cautionary tale of the dangers associated with becoming a petro-state. Ever since the discovery of oil in the 1920s, the country has experienced a bumpy economic journey that has been marked by a series of highs and lows, with periods of prosperity followed by severe downturns, providing a valuable lesson for other resource-rich countries. In the 1970s, the oil industry of Venezuela was nationalized, which led to a significant increase in government revenue, which was used to fund social programs and public infrastructure. However, they had no idea the things fate had in store for the country. Oil prices in Venezuela collapsed, leading to a recession, and the government was forced to implement austerity measures. Venezuela had every reason to prosper. Just look at Saudi Arabia, for example. With the discovery of oil reserves in Saudi Arabia, the country has become a nation with fast economic growth. What happened to Venezuela even though it had all it takes to become prosperous? Well, Saudi Arabia had something that Venezuela didn't. Decades of poor governance have led to a devastating economic growth and political downfall, turning what was once one of Latin America's most prosperous countries into a spiraling doom. It was only after the election of Hugo Chavez in 1999 that Venezuela started to see a glimmer of hope as Chavez implemented a number of social policies, including price controls and nationalizations. Although price controls were implemented in an effort to make basic goods more affordable for the poor, it often led to shortages as businesses were unable to sell goods at a loss. As a result, shortages of food, medicine, and other essential goods became widespread, causing great difficulty to its population. The nationalization of the oil industry was one of the biggest mistakes made by Chavez, which only added more fuel to the fire. This mistake cost the country its will to prosper. The decline in efficiency and productivity due to the incompetence of the government in managing these industries like the private sector was evident. Had they not nationalized the oil industry, half of the country's current problems could have been solved. In addition to these specific policies, Chavez's overall approach to the economy was problematic. He relied heavily on oil revenue, causing the Dutch disease, an economic phenomenon that occurs when a country's economy becomes too independent on the export of a single commodity. In Venezuela's case, it was oil. The Dutch disease can lead to a number of problems including inflation, currency devaluation, and a decline in other sectors of the economy. Therefore, when the oil prices declined in 2014, the economy collapsed. Chavez also failed to diversify the economy, which made the country even more vulnerable to decline in oil prices. These policies led to economic growth in the short term, but they also contributed to the country's current economic crisis. In recent years, Venezuela has faced an economic collapse, witnessing a staggering 75% contraction in output and grappling with rampant hyperinflation, which has resulted in a scarcity of basic goods. Contributing to this crisis, government mismanagement and U.S. sanctions have caused a drastic decline in oil production and substantial underinvestment in the oil sector. So basically, Venezuela is a petro-state, a term used to describe countries that exhibit several interconnected attributes, such as heavy reliance on oil and natural gas exports for government income, concentration of economic power and political power in the hands of a privileged minority, and the presence of weak and unaccountable institutions with widespread corruption. Venezuela's economic woes are like an oil well that seems bottomless with no end in sight. Venezuela was going through a hard time with pain upon pain, plaguing its citizens. As the economy collapsed, hyperinflation struck, which was a very high rate of inflation, typically characterized by prices rising rapidly, and the currency losing its purchasing power very quickly. The purchasing power of Venezuelan currency, the bolivar, has declined dramatically as a result of hyperinflation. In 2016, the bolivar was worth about 2 cents USD. In 2018, the annual inflation rate in Venezuela reached 65,374%. This was the highest inflation rate in the world. The monthly inflation rate then reached 50% in 2019, doubling the prices every 2 months. The bolivar had lost 99% of its value since 2016. For example, a loaf of bread that cost 10 bolivars in 2016 would now cost over 10 million bolivars. Imagine carrying a wheelbarrow full of bolivars to buy basic necessities. Though it sounds amusing, that's how the people of Venezuela have been buying necessities for the past few years. For those who don't have money to wheelbarrow around, consider them a lost cause. These are not the only sad things happening there. People are often forced to wait in long lines to buy basic goods. On top of it, businesses are closing down due to the high cost of doing business. Crime is on the rise as people resort to illegal activities to survive. The quality of life in Venezuela has declined dramatically. By 2022, the bolivar was worth less than 0.00001 US dollar. This means that the price of goods and services has increased an astronomical amount in Venezuela. Now, what happens when your country can't provide you with basic necessities like food and healthcare? You probably would want to seek refuge in a nearby country. It doesn't matter if you have to leave your precious home where you've spent your entire life, because at the moment, surviving the crisis is most important. Now, what happens when all the skilled people migrate to other countries? Will there be any workers left in the mother country to do jobs and other forms of labor? Absolutely not. To add to the problem, brain drain was a significant side effect of the economic crisis. Skilled workers emigrated to other countries because they were struggling to survive in these conditions due to poverty. The debt crisis in Venezuela is no joke. As of 2023, the total public debt of Venezuela is estimated to be around $100 billion. This debt is made up of both foreign as well as domestic debt. The foreign debt of Venezuela is around $60 billion, owed to foreign governments, banks, and investors, and the domestic debt is around $40 billion, owed to Venezuelan citizens, businesses, and institutions. The Venezuelan government has been struggling to make payments on its debt for several years. However, it was in 2017 that their government defaulted on its debt payments for the first time since 1983 to the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. In the last attempt to give the government of Venezuela a chance to change its ways, economic sanctions have been imposed by the US, Canada, the European Union, and other countries. The sanctions have made it difficult for Venezuela to export its oil, which is the country's main source of income. In 2019, Venezuelan oil exports fell by 80% compared to the previous year. This has led to a sharp decline in government revenue, which has made it difficult for the government to provide basic services to the population. The sanctions have also made it difficult for the government to borrow money, which has made it difficult to finance its budget deficit. The impact of the sanctions on the Venezuelan economy has been immense. The sanctions have made it all the more difficult to export its oil, import goods and services, and attract foreign investment, further adding to the economic and humanitarian crisis. In the last decade, President Nicolas Maduro and his supporters have disregarded fundamental democratic principles to cling to power. They even imposed restrictions on internet access and engaged in unjust prosecution and detention of political opponents and critics. These challenges, along with the international sanctions and the COVID-19 pandemic, have exacerbated a profound humanitarian crisis. By the looks of it, the future of Venezuela is uncertain. The country is facing a number of challenges right now that can be solved in due time only if the government decides to make amends. There are a number of potential scenarios for the future of Venezuela. One possibility is that the government will be able to implement reforms and to stabilize the economy. This would require the government to lift foreign exchange controls, to rationalize price controls, and to increase transparency and accountability. The future of Venezuela will depend on a number of factors, including the actions of the government, the response of the international community, and the will of the Venezuelan people. It is too early to say what the future will hold, but it is clear that Venezuela is at a crossroad. What do you think are the most promising solutions to the economic crisis in Venezuela? Will Venezuela ever be able to redeem itself in front of the international community? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.